So, what are we doing today? Well, I'm in Finca Casanga, and that's in Panama, and today I'm taking a coffee tour with another farmer. So as you can see, I'm standing next to a coffee tree and just getting ready to take the tour. The owners of the finca are a couple from Oregon. Their names are Andy and Rick. They moved to Panama approximately 9 years ago, and they've been actively running their farm for 7 years. Since this farm is a small farm similar to my own in size, if you can equate apples with oranges, since I'm a cattle or a livestock raiser, they had to make their own machines for coffee processing because most of the machines are set up for large industrial coffee farms. So as you can see, there's a number of signs in front of the coffee plants, and these are people that lease a coffee plant, and there are all kinds of people from all kinds of countries that have leased a coffee plant. It's a very peaceful morning here on the finca, or the farm, and as you can see, the Muscovy ducks are doing their insect patrol with their babies. Muscovy ducks are prolific egg layers and apparently good mommies for the majority of them. And they're right to task. The farm dogs have been released and they patrol the area. They keep it more or less free of pests that you may not want on a tropical farm. So here's the digs that we rented, very economically based, and in fact they rent this out on Airbnb, and if you want to volunteer to work on the farm, I believe you'll also be staying in the same similar place, or if not this place altogether. I'm sorry for the mess. It's the morning of rising up and getting ready for the actual tour. So basically, these are converted shipping containers. There's 2 TVs and 3 bedrooms. Very private. Good hot water. Of course, coffee in the morning. Ample supply.
Go by Ricardo because everyone calls me Senor Ken, so everyone is Ricardo here. But you can call me whatever. This is Joseph. Joseph's here to evaluate me today and see if I have any business. So we'll see how things go. And our plan today is I'm going to teach you guys how to produce coffee. Rainy season, which should be March or April. The coffee starts to get a lot of water. And this is what causes it to start budding and making flowers. And that flower gets pollinated and starts growing a tiny little coffee cherry. Each of these little bumps, if I hadn't killed it this morning, would turn into a coffee cherry. And then they get a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger, and they get some color and some more color. And then this is what we're really looking for. This nice dark red. A little over 70% of Panama is planted with either Cadura or Catuai. More often than not, just a mix like this, and oftentimes they are just lumped together like we do. There are some places that are selling single varietal, Rust or Roya. This is not just a Panama thing. This is not just a coffee thing. This affects lots of crops around the world. But what's happened is the weather has changed a little bit, and this has changed a lot. So this fungus is now far more aggressive than it used to be. Who has tasted geisha? All of you. Okay, well, you'll try mine today. It'll probably taste the same.
Okay.
So the thing is, they brought these to Panama in the 1960s, and they were a little more resilient at the time. Actually, the top of our hill here at Don Pepe is supposed to be the first place they planted them. There's a few people taking credit for it, so I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they say. Anyway, they planted them, and this is what they got. It takes up a lot of space and doesn't make a lot of coffee. So farmers weren't that excited about it. And actually, the bigger thing was it was kind of hard to sell.
A little bit, but
Just
where
break the
it's
handle.
fuel is going to help you. Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
So, from here. Good job.
Is we're going to fill this with coffee. It'll run some electricity from the center post to the outside, and the more moisture, the more conduction, we'll get a number, which is much better than a feeling on my tooth. So your job is to fill it. It's a perfect machine for us because tiny little batches, and this is non-destructive testing. It doesn't hurt the coffee. So now we need to tighten this. This is your job. Tighten this until the silver part is even with the black part. So there's a spring in here, and that'll give us the right amount of pressure so that we get an accurate number. Yep. Keep going. It's a strong spring.
Oh, goodness.
That looks pretty close. I think we're there. Oh yeah, we're good.
We're good?
So now we'll turn it on, let it warm up, and in a moment we're gonna see how much water is actually in here. I don't know. I suspect it's a little bit wet, but
Wow.
it works great if you got at least 20 pounds of coffee, because it only works while coffee's moving through the system. So this thing is great, but Alan, he's only gonna have a couple pounds. Completely useless for his tree, right? So, and nobody builds a machine to do one tree, because why would you build a machine like that? So when it comes time to do these individual trees, this is where we get into some pretty old technology. Yeah, this is called a pilon. You're gonna get the idea pretty quick here. This is ugly coffee for people to play with, because I don't trust you with real coffee. But when it's time to do Alan's tree, this gets emptied, his coffee gets put in here, and then you beat it with a stick. This is the starter stick. Then when you get really good at this, you can stir with one hand also. I wouldn't do that on my first day though. The idea is you're gonna hit in the center nice and firm, and we're gonna break that stuff up. Give it a try.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, come on.
I need
More
to use
than that.
force?
Yeah.
Well, use your women force.
Going to have each of you have a different machine. And who here is an overachiever?
We all are.
You are?
We all are. 'Cause we're women.
Well, okay, you're closest to this one, you get that one. I'm gonna have you pick this one. Okay. That's not what I wanted. Same with this. You heat it up in a machine, it will pop and it will turn into coffee. We don't use the word pop, that's for popcorn, and we're a little bit better than that, so we use the word crack. So, we're gonna put in your seeds, they're going to crack, and they're gonna turn into coffee. You each have a roasting chart in front of you. And you're not on my chart until you hear that first one crack. And like popcorn, they do not all pop at the same time. It's just like popcorn. But when you hear that first one crack, you're right here on my chart. If you decide to stop it there, you grind it up and you drink it, it's going to taste like you put vinegar in it. The seeds are very, very acidic. This is a volcano. The ground is very acidic. The seeds are acidic. But as each one cracks and turns into coffee, you go down the chart. Right here is where every single one of them has cracked. You have no seeds and you have no burnt ones. This is like your perfect popcorn. Like, absolutely perfect. Has anyone ever done absolutely perfect popcorn? Yeah. So this is why it does take a long time to get really good. You need to know your seeds to know how far you can push it to get those last seeds to crack before you burn some of them. But this is the smoothest you can make it. So sour, a little bit sour, smooth, but if you continue to cook it, it will build up pressure and it will crack a second time. Each one that cracks a second time, you have burnt it. For each one you burn, you have more bitter burnt taste. But for each one you burn, you lose caffeine. So those that say, I like strong coffee. Well, do you like strong like caffeine or strong like bitter burnt? These names in green are not worldwide. So California and New York, a city roast might be completely different. Europe, a city roast is different than the US or Canada. Okay, here's just that. It's yours. You decide it's perfect, but your medium. You want it before this.
Yes, slightly before this.
I would press it now.
Okay.
Oh, I heard a crack.
Alright.
So you can leave all of your stuff here. You're going to take your tray. You two are going to come with me to learn. We're going to learn how to make coffee quick. This stuff is just light as air.
You can use the fan.
But it sucks most of it out. But the little machines don't have such a big fan, so we get to clean them by hand. Yours looks really good. Yours has a little more in it. And then the big thing is, we really want to be looking for anything that's really dark. Something that over roasted will be very, very bitter. That's the most important thing to get rid of. The light beans, they're just going to taste kind of flat and bland. Not that big of a deal. But anything that's really, really dark, we want to get out of there because it's not going to taste it. Even one or two of them in a bag this size will impact flavor. And you guys are going to do the same to yours. That's looking really good, actually. And then you're going to need to decide if you want to take it ground or as beans. Okay. What's in your bag is not really a finished product. A finished product probably comes in a cup. And so this is just an experiment to see how much you can change your coffee even after all of these things have been done. You can hate them all and it won't hurt my feelings. That's not what it's about. It's just an experiment. So what we're using is the same kind, no, this is honey process actually, but it's the same coffee from our farm. It's a medium roast, medium grind, just a really generic coffee. And
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
How was this process? Was it honey process?
That was wet process.
Wet, okay. Washed.
And the real reason we do that is because it's a lot easier to roast.
Understood. Just wanted to discuss.
Honey process is a little bit harder to even out during the roast process, so we make it easy with wet. So who has used this? Everyone. All right. So this will be our first method. Italian espresso, mocha pot. It's got a few different names. Really, this was espresso before fancy machines that you see in coffee shops. And espresso really just means that we're brewing it under pressure. The more pressure we use, the more we extract. We don't get to decide more of what, really just more. We are going to do something different today, though. Well, maybe different. We are starting with really hot water. Does anybody do this? No. No? Okay. Now, I didn't do this for a long time, but there is a reason for this. If you start with cold water, you put so much heat into this little thing that you start to re-roast the coffee. It changes it. If we start with hot water, it happens fast enough that it doesn't impact the coffee. What it really means, though, is that this is hot, so don't touch this. But it's your turn. Come fill this, please. So remember, don't touch this.
Fill it to the brim?
Yes. Now, different parts of the world like to do this in different ways. I'm not going to tell you one's right or wrong. What I do is I fill it up, I tamp it down just a little bit, add a little more if I need to, and go with it. But there are parts of the world that say you should put half your body weight into it, and there's other parts that think you should put no pressure at all. I've even had people argue if you should brew it with the lid open or closed. I close the lid because it makes a mess. It seems like there's a reason for the lid, but I had a guy from Spain that insisted I brewed it with the lid open. I don't know if that makes any difference, but he certainly believed it did, so that's fine. none of this stuff is right or wrong. Different people like different things, but we're just gonna see how much difference we notice between these methods. That looks pretty good to me. Yep, I think so. So we'll put this on the stove, and it should brew pretty quickly because we started with such hot water. Is this anybody's favorite?
When I don't have very, very good coffee,
Yeah?
that's my favorite.
Okay. All right, we'll get that going. How about this? Who's used this? Yeah,
I have
yeah.
used it.
This is my favorite. This is what we use in our house in the morning. And the thing I like about this is you get to control everything, which also means there's lots of ways for it to not turn out like you're planning. We're gonna do something a little different with this also though. We're going, now normally you would brew the coffee in here for probably 3, 4, 5 minutes, maybe as long as 10. We're gonna do a really short brew time, like a minute or less. And the reason is the bitter flavors in coffee are some of the last flavors to come out. So a really quick brew time should give us less bitters. We're just gonna use a little more coffee to kind of make up for that. Your turn.
Okay.
You don't have a camera in your hands, I'm gonna give it to you. We're gonna fill this to a little bit below the right.
Okay.
I'm not weighing this. That would be the right way probably, especially if you want it consistent. I've done this with this device enough times that I have a pretty good idea on it, but there are lots of people in the world that will weigh everything. That should work fine. Okay, so that's brewing right now. We're gonna save this for last because it's gonna happen so fast. And next, we're gonna go to the table and set up our third method. There's a spot. This is the oldest method of brewing coffee that we're using today. I have a spot for you over here, but you can sit there if you'd rather. It's up to you. So the oldest method we're using comes from Germany. It is, of course, the most complicated method you could possibly imagine to make coffee. But we're gonna get this set up and we'll talk about what's special about it, because there is something kind of special, not just the way it looks.
That's why they're more expensive. Yes, in the coffee.
They're actually a lot more convenient, but the power's not always on here and this always lights. So we use the alcohol burner. And so this water will get hot and it won't be able to go anywhere except up. So it will push it up this tube through this cotton filter. It is a reusable filter, so we might get a little color in the water. And then it'll push the water up here. That's when we're gonna add our coffee. And then things change. So on the stove, we're brewing under pressure. Pretty good pressure, actually. The French press, no pressure at all, just the air. This is the only method I know of that uses a vacuum to brew coffee. So once the coffee has brewed in here, we're gonna remove this from the heat, and this lower chamber will cool down and create a vacuum, and it'll actually suck the water down. And you wouldn't think there's any difference between pressure on one side or a vacuum on the other, but we get different flavors out of this. And so I think there's a little more going on here, but honestly, I don't understand it that well. Most people haven't used this in the last 100 years, so I don't understand it, but it is interesting. Mostly it's fun and cool, and that's why we do it. All right, I am gonna put 3 giant scoops of coffee in here. We're gonna use quite a bit of coffee. And we'll get it mixed in there. We're gonna let that brew for a little bit. I'm going to check on our espresso, which is flowing. So we're pretty close there. And then we're gonna do our French press while this is brewing.
So how many tablespoons of coffee do you add per person?
So this, this is different for everybody. There's a lot of people that will tell you what's right. I don't buy into any of that. You should put whatever you like. Generally speaking, we're probably doing about 20 milliliters of water for every gram of coffee. But different people will like different things. It is all over the place, and I'm not going to tell you what I think is right, because I don't think there is right. What we should see here is a lot of bubbles. This is called the bloom, like a flower blooms. And the reason we have so much is that's the carbon dioxide coming out, and we're gonna have to stir this to be able to plunge it. You don't normally get that much at home. It doesn't mean the coffee's bad, it just means it's already off-gassed, and since we're roasting every day here, this still has a lot of carbon dioxide in it. And so I don't know what our brew time was on that, but I would say a minute or less. I mean, that was pretty quick. All right, you can turn your cups over anytime you like. We're gonna let this go, and I'm gonna check on our the espresso, and we're gonna start pouring here. Perfect.
So that's what we're doing today. I just gave you a glimpse. It was a 3-hour coffee tour, and a special shout out to both Rick and Andy. You were excellent hosts. And if you like the content, please subscribe and give a thumbs up. That's it for now. Bye.